Hi everybody, my name is Lillian Ruiz and I am the instructor for English 247, Women in Literature. And what this video is going to do is to give you a sense of what I would have discussed with you if we were meeting in person. And I can let you know that my online classes try to duplicate as much as possible what would occur if we were having an in-person class. I don't know if you can hear in the background, but there is a thunderstorm that is beginning, so I'm hopeful that that will not influence this video in any way. But at any rate, what I wanted to do was to draw your attention to our Moodle site and to direct your attention to some of the elements that you will be accessing over the course of the semester. You'll see there is a folder that's entitled Syllabus and Other Documents, and that's where I've uploaded our class syllabus and our class outline, all of the materials that I would give you as handouts. I've also got a section that is entitled Assignment Dates, and what I've done is I've just pulled out all of the dates that you've got assignments due from our course outline and listed them in the assignment date section. I've also got a folder for past class sessions, and what that folder will do is list all of the previous weeks. So you should be able to access our current week on Moodle. So that should be easily visible to you when you are on our Moodle site. But you can access the rest of the semester by going on to past class sessions. You can see that we've also got a discussion forum where you will be participating in terms of the course in relation to attendance questions through our discussion forum. There is also an optional live chat and an optional live Zoom if you wanted to interact with me or with your classmates. And you could do that through the chat room and also through the Zoom. And as I indicated, I wanted to review the syllabus and other documents section. So what I've got is the syllabus for the course and the course outline to give you an overview of what it is that we are going to be doing over the course of the semester. And this is a summer session, so obviously this session is condensed. We would do the same amount of work that we would do in your traditional 16-week semester, but we do it in a more condensed format. So basically, we are doing it in half the amount of time. And that means there is a good amount of reading that needs to be done fairly quickly that I'm going to be talking about in a few moments. But you can see if you're looking at the syllabus document, my name is on there. That's usually one of the first things I'm asked is, what should I call you? Most people call me Lillian. I've been at GCC for a very long time now, almost 30 years. It's hard to believe. And I'm pretty informal. I teach mostly English classes, but I also teach public speaking classes, and I also teach media and popular culture classes as well. You might have heard about a class in horror film. That's one of the media and popular culture classes that I teach. And as I'm looking at the storm outside the window, I think about how appropriate that setting would be for that particular course. But since we are going to be talking about Frankenstein in this class, and Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein as part of a ghost story competition, I think the Thunder and Lightning is very appropriate for that piece. My email is there, and you can see that my email is just my surname, not my first initial, which goes to show how long I've been at GCC, that when I began, we were just instituting the email system, and we hadn't implemented the first initial yet. So it's Ruiz, R-U-I-Z, at gcc.mass.edu. The phone number that'll get you to my office, which I will be checking regularly because I'm off campus, obviously, 775-1236. And finally, my office, North 328A. And in terms of interacting with me, you can do so through our optional Moodle chat room, as I indicated, and you can set up an appointment for that, or our optional Moodle Zoom, and again, you can set up an appointment for that. Or we can also do an optional office hour and meet in my office or via telephone, and you can set up an appointment for that as well. For the textbooks, you can see that I am basically leaving it up to you as to which edition of the books to use. The good news is that we are working with texts that are now in the public domain so that you can find these texts online. In fact, you will see as I review the course outline that I've indicated links for where you can find the material online for free. But if you wanted to use paper texts, I always recommend the Signet Classics. They're paperbacks and they're very well done. But basically any text is fine, so that if you've got a text of your own that you wanted to use, certainly you could. We are going to be reading Kate Chopin, specifically one of her short stories, The Story of an Hour, and also reading her novella at the ending of the semester called The Awakening. We are going to be reading some of Emily Dickinson's poetry, but there aren't any specific poems that I'm going to be assigning. I'm going to ask you to choose some of her poetry. Probably the best known compilation of her works is entitled Final Harvest by Johnson, but you can use another text. We will talk about when we get to Dickinson that you want to make sure that you are using the non-edited version of her poetry. The easy way to identify that is that those non-edited poems have irregular capitalization and also the use of a dash in places where one would be accustomed to using a comma. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why she made those stylistic choices when we get to the Dickinson section. Frankenstein, as I had indicated, by Mary Shelley. Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs. Jane Eyre, and that is by Charlotte Bronte. Persuasion by Jane Austen. So you can see we've got a good number of novels in this class, with an assumption that it's assumed you've got a good dictionary thesaurus for reference, and I assume that you've got access to that electronically. But having access to something and actually using it can be two different things. So I do want you to get into the habit of using both, because that will help you certainly with your writing, since this is also a class in writing as well as in reading. And for the course description, just to remind you about the class, that this is a study of work by women writers through the 19th century. And we will discuss literature in various genres within the historical and social context of the times. So basically the 1800s. In relation to early literary movements and from the perspective of a unique female literary tradition. And there is a prerequisite for this class that it would be either what we call English 112, 114, or 116. In other words, an introduction to literature class either at GCC or at another institution. So if you feel that you have not satisfied those requirements, please let me know and we could talk about what options are available for you. So under student learning outcomes, basically I've indicated some of the elements that I think will be the results of this particular course. That we will read, critically examine, and appreciate the literary voices of British and American women in the 19th century, which means that we'll be talking a little bit about the history of the 1800s. To identify major themes and issues in 19th century women's literature. And this was a time period where women weren't necessarily known for being authors. So we'll talk about how that influenced their writing. To see the relationship between 19th century women's literature and our present day world. The idea with literature is that it examines timeless and universal themes, which is one of the reasons why we still read literature from periods of the past. To improve oral and written communication skills, and I have that on all of my syllabi for all of the classes that I teach. English 247 offers a general introduction to the content and technique of 19th century women's literature. Representative literary works will be studied. Obviously, we can't read everything that was produced during that time. This course emphasizes critical thinking, critical reading, critical writing, a lot of critical in there, not as in criticism and giving negative commentary, but the idea of analyzing and interpreting, or doing what I think toddlers do very well. They ask lots of questions, especially why. And there may not necessarily always be a simple answer to that why question. As a class, we will strive to appreciate the aesthetic and literary merits of 19th century women's literature. So how will I be conducting this class in an online format? And this is in the procedure section of the syllabus. So what I'm going to be doing is posting a video of myself, much like I'm doing now, discussing the class material at the time that our class would normally meet in person. So if we were meeting in person, we would meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9 a.m. So that means by Tuesday and Thursday at 9 a.m. I will have a class video. And you will have a 48-hour deadline to watch that particular video and answer its corresponding attendance question, which will be posted in our class discussion forum. And if you do need more time, just ask me for an extension. I have no problem with granting you an extension. Your answer on the class discussion forum is basically your attendance for that particular class. So it would be as if you were participating in the actual class itself by answering that particular question. Now, you're encouraged to have interaction with your classmates, but any additional interaction you have with your classmates in the discussion forum is similar to participation in class, in a live class. And I know that some students learn best by participating, but then other students learn best by listening. So you can decide how much or how little to participate. You should, however, read all of the discussion forum responses from all of your classmates, and I will be responding to all of your responses. You should read those responses as well. So that's my way of trying to duplicate the class discussion that we would normally have if we were meeting in class. And I will ask questions that don't necessarily have right or wrong answers. Again, the idea is that these are questions that ask you to contemplate and to put forth opinion. There will be written assignments in the class, and the way you will be submitting your written assignments, whether they be journals or papers or final exam, and I'll talk about all of these in a moment. You will be sending them via PDF to my email address, ruiz@gcc.mass.edu. That's how my grading program works best, through PDF format through email. And then I will return the assignments to your email with my feedback, as if we were actually exchanging paper copies back and forth. So the course requirements are fairly obvious, that you should complete all the reading and the writing assignments by the due date. If you need additional time, please ask me for an extension. There will be 2 out-of-class papers assigned, one approximately midway through the semester and one approximately towards the ending of the semester. You'll also be submitting informal writing assignments, periodic journal entries, discussing your reactions and responses to the reading. And that's addressed a little bit more in the section entitled Journal that I'll talk about in a moment. There'll also be a final exam, and the final exam is open book, open notes, and basically you will have a 24-hour period in which to respond to the final. It's an essay exam. If we were meeting in class, you would have 2 to 3 hours to do that final. Again, I'm going to give you a 24-hour period to do that final exam. And I'm not expecting you to spend 24 hours working on that final. Again, somewhere in the area of 2 to 3 hours. Again, I'm trying to duplicate as much as possible what we would have done if we were meeting in class. You can see that my syllabus has an institutional services disability statement, which if you are taking other classes at GCC, you're probably familiar with this, that GCC values inclusion and equal access to its programs and activities, and is committed to fostering an environment of respect and full participation. Our goal is to create learning environments that are equitable, inclusive, and welcoming. If there are aspects of the instruction or design of this course that result in barriers to your inclusion or accurate assessment or achievement, please notify the instructor as soon as possible. And if you're a student with a disability and you need reasonable academic accommodations, please contact the Office of Disability Services as soon as possible to discuss your needs and options. And you can see that I've included information for their website and their contact phone number. So those journals, those informal writing assignments that I was talking about, that you will write at the ending of each of the major readings that we'll be doing over the course of the semester. Let me just read you the section that I've got in the syllabus about journals. That reading and writing is an ongoing process. So journals are meant as an opportunity for you to discuss your reactions to the readings. Thus, the guidelines are very informal. The students should use the journals as an opportunity to explore literature in the way they feel would be most beneficial. Occasionally, I might give you a suggestion in class, but on the whole, the journal should reflect what your relevant thoughts and questions are about the reading. Sometimes the questions are a lot more important than the answers, actually. I think it's best to record these thoughts after you've completed the reading assignment when the ideas are still fresh. Some students like to take notes as they are reading. Some students like to wait until after they've seen the class videos and they've read the form responses from their classmates. Whatever system works best for you. And the journals provide an excellent opportunity to brainstorm and free write paper topics. And I will be providing paper topics, but you will also be encouraged to create your own paper topic if you'd like. So you can begin playing with that in a journal. And even final exam questions, not that you get to create your own final exam question, but you never know if you actually, through a journal, anticipate something that would be on a final exam. And again, the final exam is open book, open notes, so you can reference things like your journals. Again, the journals should be numbered and submitted via PDF to my email, Ruiz, R-U-I-Z, @gcc.mass.edu. And I'm going to be grading them informally on a checkmark system. So a excellent would be graded as a plus, and a satisfactory would be, or a good would be graded as a check plus, and a satisfactory would be graded as a check. Less than satisfactory would be a check minus. Unsatisfactory would be a minus. Late journals will lower your grade by 1 full grade, and no late journal will be accepted after 1 week has elapsed unless you've made other arrangements with me beforehand. So again, ask for an extension if you need additional time. And attendance, class activity and discussion is extremely important and can't be made up. So absences is negatively reflected in your participation grade. And while each case is different, anything more than 1 absence could lower your grade. And again, the way that I'm trying to duplicate attendance is by having an attendance question that you would answer in our discussion forum within 48 hours of a posted video. And you don't need to notify me if you're going to be absent for a particular class. However, do speak with me if you are going to miss several classes. And consultations, as I had indicated, you can meet with me by appointment. So papers, the formal assignments, and what I've got on the syllabus here is just some information about the specifics of the formatting of the papers, that they are due on the days specified, and they should be typed in double space and have 1-inch borders. Pages should be numbered and should also include a cover page, which include things like the paper title, your name, the course and section number, my name, and the due date. So I'm hopeful that you talked about this in English 101, but we will also review the conventions for writing a paper in this class. And much again, as late work is, late work will lower your grade by 1 full grade, and no late paper will be accepted after 1 week has elapsed unless you've made other arrangements with me beforehand. So please ask for an extension if you need one. And that I will distribute paper assignments during the term as we begin to talk about some of the literature, but you are also encouraged to create your own paper assignments, so you can keep that in the back of your mind after we begin reading. And in terms of influencing your grade positively, every student has the option to revise the first paper if they so choose, the one that will be due midway through the semester. I sort of see that as the learning experience with writing a paper. And then your second paper due at the ending of the semester is your implementing what you've learned. So once you've submitted in your first paper and I've given corresponding feedback, and I grade those papers formally for grammar, mechanics, and content, unlike the journals, which I just grade for content and I don't grade for grammar or mechanics, which is why there's a check mark system there. Basically, I will give you my feedback, and then if it turns out, with a letter grade, if it turns out you wanted to improve your letter grade, you could rewrite the paper. I just ask that you submit in the original with my commentary on it, along with your revision, and you would get the higher of the 2 grades, so the first grade would disappear. And usually papers are somewhere in the area of 4 to 5 pages long, but when we get to the paper section, we'll talk about the specifics in terms of a paper. Again, I believe in flexibility. And the same with the journals. The journals are going to be flexible. Most students end up writing about a page or so of response in their journals for each of the major works that they're reading. But again, it will depend on what it is you have to say and what it is that the work has to say as well. There's a section on plagiarism that I'm going to skip here and talk about that next class. I get to the grading, and these are approximate percentages of how your final grade will be evaluated. So 10% is participation, so that basically means attendance, watching the class videos, answering the class discussion forums, basically being involved in the course. 15% is based on those journals that I was talking about that I'm evaluating informally on a checkmark system. 25% is that first paper, which will be approximately 4 to 5 pages long, but as long as it needs to be ultimately, as we will discuss. And you have the option of rewriting that for a higher grade. 25% for paper number 2, and that's due at the ending of the semester. There wouldn't be time for a revision. There have been some cases where students have submitted in their second paper early enough so that through negotiation with me, they were able to rewrite their second paper. So that is a possibility. But again, the idea is that the second paper is just you're implementing what you've learned in terms of writing a paper through your first paper. So revision wouldn't be necessary. And lastly, that final exam, which I had indicated is an essay exam, and it's open book, open notes, and that'll be 25%. So that would basically determine a grade for an A, excellent, a B, good, C, satisfactory, and so forth. So now I'm going to move to our course outline, and that document basically lists the assignments we are going to be doing and the dates associated with those assignments, as well as the due dates for your written work. With at the top a little disclaimer that dates and assignments might be subject to change, and that reading should be done before the dates indicated. It's because the idea of what this course outline shows is that what I'm going to be discussing during that particular date. And you can see that I've got week 1 listed, and this would be for the 24th. I'm well aware that you might be watching this video before Tuesday the 24th, but if we were meeting in person, we would be meeting on the 24th. So I think of this video as the Tuesday video of the 24th, or the Tuesday meeting of the 24th, I should say. And this is our introduction. And because there is so much reading associated with this class, what I wanted to do was to give you the Thursday class where we would normally meet as a reading day, so that you can get caught up and perhaps even ahead with all of the readings that we've got over the course of the semester, so that we can begin in earnest next week. And what I've got assigned next week, and again, I'll be posting a video every Tuesday and Thursday. What I've got assigned for Tuesday's reading of next week is an essay entitled The Cult of True Womanhood. And luckily I was able to find a link for this. Normally I would give a handout. And it's an investigation of periodicals, magazines during the 1800s, and the sorts of messages those magazines gave about what it meant to be a woman, a true woman during this time period. So this will be a little bit of a history lesson through popular culture, because I do teach classes in media and popular culture, to give you an idea of what the expectations were for female. And I also have a short story for us to read by Chopin, a very important author during this time period. We'll be ending the semester by reading her novella, The Awakening. But the short story is called The Story of an Hour. You might be familiar with it from other classes. If you are using the Signet textbook that I was suggesting, that would be The Awakening and Selected Stories by Kate Chopin on page 217, or any version of The Story of an Hour that you can find in any edition. And you can see that I've also found this online, and there is a link for this online if you'd like to access it that way. And then you can see that we've got 2 classes devoted to Frankenstein. Now, Frankenstein is a full-length novel, so when I have 2 classes assigned for it, my hope is that the first class is the point where you would have read the novel in its entirety, so that we can talk about the novel in its entirety over 2 classes. Keep in mind that 1 class session is the equivalent of an academic semester week, of a 16-week academic semester, so obviously we're very condensed. And that while we are talking about Frankenstein over 2 classes, or in other words, 2 weeks of an academic semester, you are reading the next text, which happens to be Persuasion. So again, I'm hopeful that you're able to use that reading day so that you can read The Cult of True Womanhood and read as far as possible into Frankenstein, so that when we begin Frankenstein on the 2nd of June, then you can begin reading the next text, which happens to be Persuasion. We'll talk a little bit more about writing journals, and your first journal won't be due until the 7th of May, or I'm sorry, the 7th of June. And basically, by that point, we would have put closure to our discussions about Frankenstein. So you could utilize what we've discussed about Frankenstein if you so wanted to. And again, about approximately a page or so response, but certainly you could write more. And I'm not evaluating for grammar or mechanics, just for content. As if we were having a conversation on paper, and grading that on a check mark scale, with the plus being excellent, check plus being very good, a check being satisfactory, check minus being less than satisfactory, and a minus being unsatisfactory. And then you can see that starting on the 9th of June, we are going to be reading Persuasion. And one of the things about Persuasion is that it gives us a viewpoint into the lifestyle of the wealthy and the privileged. And I wanted to have that contrast for when we're reading texts like Jane Eyre, and when we are reading texts like Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, which is the exact opposite of privilege. And one of the things that I think is quite interesting is that the rich and the poor live side by side. You might say the same is true today, but this was also the time of slavery, which is why Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl is such an important text. So keep this in mind when we begin reading Frankenstein. And certainly one of the interesting things, there are many interesting things, but one of the interesting things about Frankenstein is that while it was written by a female author, it's a very male-centric world. We're not going to get into a female world until we get into Persuasion. We'll talk about some of the reasons why that might be the case. And then we'll get to Jane Eyre. It happens to be perhaps my favorite text of the semester. It's the longest text of the semester, but I think you will see that it moves much more quickly than either Persuasion or Frankenstein, even though it's a longer text. And again, you can see that I have found links for being able to access all of these texts: Frankenstein, Persuasion, and Jane Eyre. Though I'm a little bit of a dinosaur. I like working with paper and being able to annotate on paper. So at any rate, you can see that approximately on the 21st or so of June is when your first paper will be due. And I will be encouraging early papers. By this point, we would have talked about the first paper and how to construct it and possible paper topics. And I'm thinking the first paper would deal with one of the texts in the earlier part of the semester. Second paper would do with one of the texts in one of the later parts of the semester. At the 23rd of June is when we are going to be reading Emily Dickinson's poetry. Again, we could spend an entire semester with Miss Emily, but instead I've got just one class devoted. And you can see that I've got listed when the journals will be due for Persuasion, approximately the 14th of June, and when the journal will be due for Jane Eyre, which is approximately the 23rd of June. And then we move towards the ending of our summer session by reading Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. And again, I found a link for that. And you can see that our journal for that will be due on the 30th. And then we put closure to the semester by reading Kate Chopin's The Awakening. So we begin and end with Kate Chopin. And again, I've got a link for that if you'd like. That would be on the 5th of July. And then on the 7th of July is our final exam that I will be posting. This is also the last date that you can hand in the second paper, though I encourage early papers. And it also is the time to hand in your journal for our last text, The Awakening, if you haven't handed it in previously to the 7th. And if you do hand it in on the 7th, I'll make sure that I evaluate that immediately so that you can have access to that for the final exam if you so want it. And if it turns out that you think you are writing a paper about the awakening and you wanted to hand in your journal early, or any of the assignments early, certainly you can do that, because again, the summer is quite condensed. But the summer session ends on the 7th of July. So again, as I had indicated, I'm hopeful that you're able to use this week to get as much of the reading done as possible. And for this attendance question, I'm going to assume that we would be meeting on Tuesday. So your attendance question won't be due until Thursday in our discussion forum section on our Moodle site. So that would be the 26th. And I'm just going to ask you to introduce yourself to your peers, much like we would do if we were in an in-person class. And feel free to upload things like audio or video or pictures, but you're not required to. But I thought this would give us a way to get a sense of who is in the class. And then again, what I will do is on Thursday just post a reminder that it is a reading day, so that you should be reading. And of course, if you've got any questions about the class, you can contact me as well, and I can address those. And then we can begin in earnest on the 31st. By that time, we'll be done with dropping and adding and everything else. So I'm sorry that we're not meeting in person, but I'm hopeful that this video served as a substitute for that. And I hope you're all doing well during these very strange and challenging times. I'm doing well, and we will continue on next class. As I said, on the 26th, I'll just post a little message that we've got a reading day for Thursday. Our next formal class will be on the 31st, where we can begin discussing the curriculum. So I hope you're well, I'm well, and we will continue on. Take care. Bye-bye.